Hi, and welcome to another gear review video. My name is Matthias and I'm here on beautiful Phu Quoc Island in southwest Vietnam for one reason, basically, to test out the new Paralenz Underwater Action Camera. Stick around if you want to know what this little thing can do and if it is the right camera for you. Coming up. So I just came back from 2 dives testing the new Paralenz Underwater Action Camera here on the island of Phu Quoc in Vietnam, and I'm ready to give you my feedback on my first impressions of this new camera. Let's talk about the handling of the camera first. The camera is pretty straightforward. It's only got one button that you can push, or better pull, to activate the camera, to turn it on, turn it off, to start recording, to take a photo, or to switch through the menu. In addition to that, it also has a dial that you can switch in between the different modes of the camera. This all works quite easily. The menu is well laid out. Sometimes it can be complicated though, going through the menu with only that one button, because you have to go all the way to the end of certain menu points to be able to go back into like the previous menu setting. The camera itself is built very solid. It feels very solid, and it seems like it can handle a lot of misuse in terms of being banged against stuff, particularly tanks when you're on a dive boat, and it won't really affect the camera too much. One thing that I like a lot about the Paralenz Underwater Action Camera is that it has a vibration integrated. So whenever you turn the camera on, turn it off, start recording, whatever you do with the dial here, it will give you some sort of a vibration telling you that you've started or ended something. Taking it underwater then, I realized that it is, like with most small action cameras, pretty hard to get stable looking footage with this tiny camera. The main reason for that is, like with most small action cameras, that the smaller the camera system you're taking underwater or even on land, the harder it is to get stable, good looking footage. But this is not a huge problem, because you can fix this quite easily in post, just using a warp stabilizer, stabilizing your footage, and then it should look quite okay. The biggest selling point of the Paralenz camera, as the manufacturers say, is the new DCC white balance option that you get with this camera. Now what you can do with the Paralenz camera, like on any other underwater camera or any other camera for that matter, you can just set the white balance to a Kelvin setting, or the special thing about this camera is that it's got what they call a DCC, which is a white balance that will adjust depending on what depth you are on. So the camera got a depth meter inside it, it knows how deep it is, and according to that it will change the white balance. And they say that using this feature you will not need to color correct your footage in post after that, or maybe just a little bit. They have 2 settings on the DCC depending on what kind of water you're diving in. There is a green setting if you're diving in greenish water, which in my opinion would be like a lake. Or there is a blue setting which you should use when you're diving in blue water, like for example the ocean most of the time is. Now I was really curious to find out how well this DCC function works underwater, and I have to be quite honest with you and say that I was quite a bit disappointed. The water here in Vietnam looks quite blue to me. So I tried first to use the blue setting, and that didn't really work too well for me, I have to say, because all the footage just looked blue and not very natural. So Then I changed to the green setting, which worked a little better. But I have to say that with the green setting, the colors seem to be too intense. So my conclusion for now, after only having done 2 dives with the Paralenz Action Camera on the DCC, is that it's not really doing what it's supposed to do for me. Another thing that I noticed using the Paralenz Underwater Action Camera is that most of the footage, for whatever reason, looks like it's not really in focus. It doesn't look very sharp in my opinion, and I couldn't really figure out why that is the case. It is a wide angle lens, so normally this should mean that most of your footage should be in focus. And that didn't really happen in my opinion. I did take a couple of macro shots, macro footage with the camera as well, just to see how it handles that, but as expected, and this is something that applies to most small underwater action cameras that have a wide angle lens on it, it's really hard to get good macro shots, simply because if you get any closer than, let's say, about half a meter to your subject, it will not really be in focus anymore. And because it has such a wide angle lens, to be able to capture something close up, you will need to go much closer than those 50 centimeters to your object. So no big surprise there. Now let's talk about some of the problems that I have encountered using the Paralenz Underwater Action Camera, and some of them are actually quite dramatic. Now, what happened first on my second dive with the camera is that as soon as I entered the water and I turned the camera on to start recording, it would actually tell me it's recording, but it would be in like a blocked state. So I couldn't really do anything. I couldn't change any settings. I couldn't stop the recording. And it took me a good 10 minutes before I was able to turn the camera off, turn it on again, and then it would go back to normal recording. But all those 10 minutes, it didn't record at all. So that was 10 minutes of my dive that I missed out on with the filming. Another thing that Paralenz is advertising quite heavily is the ability to use the camera via their app. So supposedly you're able to connect the camera to the app and then download your footage from the camera right onto or into the app, and then just distribute it onto your social networks from the app. So actually quite a good idea, but for whatever reason, again, I'm not entirely sure why, I had a lot of problems connecting the camera to the app. It would take several attempts for me to be able to connect it at all. Once it was connected and I was trying to get the footage onto the phone, that wouldn't work whatsoever. You could select the clips, push download, it would start downloading, but it wouldn't appear in the app. The footage never really showed on my phone. So in that sense, the app is quite pointless if I cannot put or get the footage from the camera onto the app and then use it any further. I still need to open the camera, take the SD card out, and then just transfer it to a computer as I would with any other camera. Another thing, and that's the most dramatic thing that happened, is that after I finished my second dive and I was back on the dive boat, still the app wouldn't work, but I wasn't too worried about that. I just wanted to put the SD card into my computer, get the footage of the SD card, which worked, and then putting the SD card back into the camera, suddenly the camera wouldn't recognize the SD card whatsoever. It was always giving me the message no SD card, which is very weird. I've tried 4 different micro SD cards on the camera and none of them would work. The camera would just not recognize any of the SD cards, which basically means that after the second dive I was not able to record or use the camera whatsoever, because it doesn't have an internal memory or an internal hard drive. It requires an SD card to be able to film on the camera, but if it doesn't recognize any SD cards, how am I supposed to use the camera? How am I supposed to capture footage? Doesn't work. Now I don't know if this is something unheard of, because I've tried to Google this issue and I couldn't find anything on the internet of other people experiencing the same issue with the camera and the SD cards not being recognized by the camera. So at this stage, I can't really use the camera for anything. So as soon as I get back home, I will have to go and talk to the people at Paralenz and the people at the dive shop in Zurich that gave me the camera and asked me to test it for them, and we'll have to see and figure out why this happened and how we can work around it. Maybe it is something that is just affecting my camera, this one here, or maybe it's something that is affecting all of the Paralenz cameras. That we'll have to find out as soon as I get back home. Another thing that I noticed only just after looking at the footage on my computer after I've downloaded it is that on certain clips there is some very weird noises, very weird sound recorded by the in-camera mic to the footage. I'll play you a clip and just have a listen for yourself. I have no idea what this noise is and how it was created, but it seems that there is some sort of a issue with the onboard mic that is in this little camera. So, coming to my summary about the Paralenz Underwater Action Camera at this stage, and keep in mind I have only done 2 dives with this camera here in Vietnam, but at this stage I cannot recommend this camera as being a good underwater action camera. This might change once we figure out the issue with the SD card, and I will be able to get some more test dives done, and maybe some of the issues that I've had, the people at Paralenz will be able to explain to me and tell me how I can work around it. But just as it is now, as a point and shoot underwater action camera, I am not satisfied with it. I cannot recommend this camera. And this is very sad because I've really wanted to like this camera. The form factor is actually quite nice. I do like the small size of it, and I've really been looking for a good underwater action camera in addition to my professional kit that I'm using that I can take with me. So that was it, guys, with my review of my first impressions of the Paralenz Underwater Action Camera. Please keep in mind that this is by no means a scientific review. This is just giving you my first impressions and my opinion on the Paralenz camera. There certainly needs to be more testing done, and I certainly need to be able to get more dives with this camera after we fix the issue with the SD cards not being recognized. If this video was helpful to you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to my channel for more diving related content in the future, be it travel videos or gear reviews like this one here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.